over to Doug, since this is the PowerShell group of pass, and I wanted to show you something cool that I learned to do with this module, and what pretty much inspired me to say, hey Doug, why don't you give us a presentation? This thing is really awesome. I just going to show you two quick demos. One here, I've got some Excel files, and let's say I wanted to import those into my database. I can use Doug's ImportExcel module, and I can do that pretty easily. So I'll just do a quick dir. You see these two files right here that I want to import. I can use the write SQL table data commandlet to be able to put the data into a new SQL Server table, and to read it off of the hard drive, I'm going to pull it with the ImportExcel commandlet out of the ImportExcel module. Just give it the path to there, and then tell it which server instance database that I want to write it to, and it'll go right in. So I'll just run these 2 lines of code real quick, and I'll go over here to my blank DB database, and I had no tables in there just a minute ago. I just had the first one written in there just now, and it should start, you can kind of see it in the background here. There, wrote in the second table just now. Go ahead and expand tables. You can see both of them with right now, today's date is in there. And if we go and take a look at these tables, we see all the columns are in there, and lots and lots and lots of nice data types are defined for us. It's great stuff. And just go ahead and show the other table real quick. Get a sense for that one. And just show you that did import all those rows for us. Boom, there we go. And then if we wanted to go the other way with it, no problem at all. The ImportExcel module also has a way to take the output and go ahead and save it into an Excel file. And I'll just bring up that example right now, hopefully. Let's bring that up. Yep. So here's my output Excel folder. There's no files in there just yet. I'm going to take invoke SQL command, and I'm going to run a query against one of my tables in the AdventureWorks database, actually 2 of them. And I'm just going to save the output to an Excel file using the ImportExcel commandlet and write it to a file. And actually on the second one, Doug actually helped me work through this to make sure I got it right. This second one allows you to write the results of the second query that I'm writing to a different tab on the same spreadsheet. So just a different worksheet. Kick that off now. There looks like we are still processing. And we've already got our file created, and it's currently filling it up with the results of these 2 tables. Go ahead and see if I can kick that off. Going much slower now, now that I'm showing video. But yeah, those are the two demos I wanted to show you guys right now before we get started into the session with Doug. And right now I will go ahead and turn it over to Doug and let him show us all the other cool things that his module can do.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, so I got to show my screen. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great.
Slides.
Well, thanks for that demo. I guess we're pretty much done because you showed all the good parts. So
nice.
Thanks for inviting me. Okay. And thanks for inviting me on tonight. I really appreciate it. I really have fun talking about PowerShell, and I have fun talking about this module. Thanks everybody for joining. I think you're going to see some really cool things tonight. So, hang in there. We'll do some cool things. And at the end, if you hang into the end, I got a couple things I don't even think Aaron has seen that I've been playing with this module. So if you have any questions, use the questions in the chat. I guess that's what they'll see the question tab, and I'll keep an eye on that. Aaron will keep an eye on that, and happy to answer any kind of questions. If you do have them, probably some other people are thinking about it. When you do ask if I have something coming up in the demo, I'll demo it. If it's something that's a little off topic, it might be worth going down that path and answering. And if it's more complicated than that, I'll hold it to the end or can answer it offline. So this is let's kick this off, PowerShell Excel module. Just want to introduce myself. I wrote a book on PowerShell called PowerShell for Developers. I'm a 10-time Microsoft MVP. I come from a developer background, and I build advanced tools. I speak internationally. I train people in PowerShell, and I have a blog. So tonight, I'm just going to show you a couple slides, talk about a couple things. It's not just about showing you demos, but it's going to be a demo-heavy presentation. But it's also, this is an open source project, which is kind of interesting. So one of the things is how can you get the module? And I should have that here. You can go up on the PowerShell gallery if you're familiar with it, and you can grab the module here, or you can use PowerShell to do an install module. And if you want, which I highly recommend, you click on the project site here, and that takes you off to GitHub. And this is where all the source code is. Again, this is an open source project. You can come up here. If you'd like, you can actually search the issues. People ask questions. People find problems. People want features. If you go up here and create a free account on GitHub, you can join in the conversation. You can join in and ask questions, get clarification. And you can even do things what they call pull requests, where you can actually take a copy of this code, make some additions, and then if you do a pull request, I'll see that, other contributors will see it, we can review it, we can discuss it, and then we can make it part of the product. It's really cool to do that kind of stuff. You get to learn a lot of things. I get to learn from you, from questions and from different ways to approach things, making this product better, and then making it public. What's also cool about ImportExcel up here on GitHub, if you really want to take it into your, if you're doing PowerShell and you're really starting to explore different options with it and want to increase your capabilities, what's really nice here is that we use, I actually use Azure pipelines. And what I do there is I've hooked it up to the GitHub piece such that you can, every time something gets checked in, even not by myself, but as you can see here, this person checked in a pull request to change how the charting worked. It kicks this off, and what it does is in Azure DevOps, I've got it set up so that it actually pulls down all the code and then runs PowerShell pester tests. And these PowerShell pester tests, we've got about 175 of them. So if you do PRs, typically people actually will add tests to test what they actually have built. And then this proves out whether or not anything else has gotten broken. We're constantly adding to this. So if you want to increase your capabilities in terms of being a PowerShell coder, this is a good way to learn about different pieces of how to use PowerShell, how to write tests, how to use tests, so on and so forth. So those are two ways you can get the code. You can grab it from the gallery, or you can actually pull down the source itself from GitHub. So just as a couple of more notes on OSS, what's it good for? It's a great way to interact with the community. As another note, PowerShell itself is open sourced up on GitHub. So if you want to see how team members in PowerShell, how they communicate about doing new features or doing requests for comments, you can get up on to GitHub and see how they interact. If you're interested in how other software works in the world, it's a great place to go. The DBA tools for SQL, I guess Chrissy manages that, right, Aaron?
Yep, that's correct.
And that's open source as well. So if you wanted to see how she and other contributors build the DBA tools, they're all up on GitHub as well. And it's a great way to learn things. It's not just about learning PowerShell. If you want to learn how to do C# or Ruby or F# or anything else, there's tons of different things up on GitHub that you can go and take a look and learn from people. So it's a great resource. And I always like to say, geek who can write. So if you can learn how to write about your software, if you want to write articles and blog posts, you're worth more. If you can learn how to present about the code, things that you've built, you're worth more. If you have open source projects, people get to know you and you're worth more. So moving on, I just wanted to call out one person, James O'Neill. He used to work at Microsoft. I don't think he worked on the PowerShell team, but he is one of the top PowerShell developers. His claim to fame was he built the Hyper-V commandlets early on for PowerShell. He also wrote a OneNote PowerShell commandlet, which was you could actually interact with writing and reading from OneNote using PowerShell. And here are 4 articles that he wrote about this module, and he's also contributed tremendously to the to my project. I've known him for years. He's another person you learn a lot from, and he's starting to put out more open source himself. So James O'Neill, he's on Twitter. He goes to the PowerShell Summit. Very cool things. I guess one last note. Lots of the ImportExcel pieces. So if you wanted, after this, you could go check that out, grab this, and check out the videos. So with that, let's kick off how this thing works. Now, since I come from a developer's background, hey Aaron, I think there's a little bit of background noise.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, no problem. Thanks. So what I often look for is things out in the world that I can wrap in PowerShell, whether they're .NET DLLs or if there's .NET C# code out in the world. I figure out how to take that, either compile it or use the compiled versions and then wrap it in PowerShell. So let's kick this off. I'm using something called startdemo.ps1. It's been around for a number of years. I'm not positive. I think Jeffrey Snover, the creator of PowerShell, built this module. It's basically so I don't have to type PowerShell, and you can watch me make mistakes. This eliminates that to a great degree. So you can just imagine I'm working on a PowerShell prompt, and I'm typing all this stuff in and pressing enter. So it'll do it for me. So here we go. This is again how you can use the find module, and then you can install it. And the first thing I want to kick off, I don't know how many folks out there know about how you can interop with the .NET framework, but if I can drop into the C#.NET framework and say, give me the math assembly, and I want to call tangent, and it's good to go. So as soon as you load up PowerShell, you have access to the .NET framework. And this is just another example of that. One of the other things you can do with PowerShell is you can inline C#, something I do depending on if I want to get more performance or there's certain things in PowerShell that don't exist. What line 13 is showing is I'm actually creating a C# class called TestX, and I'm adding a method called add so that you can pass in N1 or N2, which are defined as integers, and then I'm just adding them and returning. So using the add-type, that actually will compile that C# on the fly, and now I can actually use that code. Now I'm just showing that as a quick background that you can drop into .NET framework. You can then also add C# to your PowerShell, so you can make it do even more things. And that's kind of what started getting me along the lines of what am I going to do with Excel. So let's look at some pieces with the Excel. So here I'm just going to, in case there's an Excel running. Now I don't know how many people know about this. You can new up an object inside of PowerShell. Hopefully some people have used that. But back in the day, you could actually do something with and use the switch or the called -com object, that parameter. And if I pass in the name of a com object, and com stands for component object model, which has been around in Windows for decades. If I pass in excel.application, what this actually will do, believe it or not, that just started Excel in the background. And now I'm going to, on the $Excel variable, I'm going to set the property visible to true and watch what happens. And it actually brings up Excel in the background for me. So I'm actually now controlling Excel from the command line, from the PowerShell command line. And we can do a bunch of cool stuff with this. This is the way you used to have to interact with Excel to date. So if I call $excel.workbooks.add, notice it adds a workbook for me, and it creates a sheet automatically. So we have a sheet 1 inside workbook, book 1. And now I can grab that sheet 1 using this notation saying go after worksheets. It's an array of sheets. I want the one named sheet 1. Now $WS has a handle to that sheet. And I can start poking values into it. Now watch the first row from A to D or so, and we can actually start poking values into Excel, right? So that's kind of cool. Now we can start poking data in the second row. And then what gets interesting is notice on line 39, I'm going to actually poke in a formula. And equal C2 times D2 is the way you do things in Excel to reference different cells and do operations on it. And now when I poke that in, notice I actually get a calculated value. But you can see that that value got that formula got poked in, and it calculates it for me. So I think I see. Is there a question in? I can't get this.
There was a question that it relates to null values. Probably save it for later.
Sounds good. So let's go along on this, and we'll just poke in a couple of more values. Now, if you notice, I'm actually the $W cells, open bracket 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm referencing the different row column values, and it gets pretty tedious. So we'll just put another row in here. Okay, and this is the way you'd need to interact with if you wanted to put values into Excel. You have to actually launch it, make it visible. And if you were doing this, if you had thousands of rows and hundreds of columns, it would take quite a long time for this thing to visually update. Users could accidentally click here. You have to manage how to close the actual window. And which is something we didn't discuss yet, you'd actually have to have Excel installed on your machine. So let's get into what ImportExcel does, this module. Any questions on that so far? Okay. So here's the canonical hello world example. If you download the module, you have something called export-excel. So I'm just going to pipe hello world into Excel. And notice it kicks off and it plugged the value in for me, right? We'll talk about what this drop down is in a little bit. So that's kind of how easy it is to use this module. It works off the same data, the object pipelining concepts inside of Excel or inside of PowerShell. So if you're familiar with how to pipe things from one function into another, this does exactly that. So it should feel familiar. So line 61, what I'm going to do now is create a hash table, and I'm going to give it a key called data. We'll make that hello world. Then I'm going to convert it into a PowerShell object, and then we'll see what happens when it goes into export Excel. So now we get a heading. Notice we get a data that's based on the key, and we get some more information in the selection criteria. Again, we'll cover that in a bit. So that's how you can start passing around arrays of objects that actually have properties. So let's remove that. Let's take the next step. So hopefully most people are familiar with get-process, right? We're going to take get-process. We're going to export it to Excel, and we're going to name the file that we want to put it in called demo.xlsx. This will take a little bit because the typical get process that you run only shows 4 or 5 columns, but the way I built the export Excel, it goes after all the properties on the object. Now notice Excel did not get launched this time, right? So that's a key point. And then Aaron and I before the meeting had discussed this a bit. You don't need to have Excel on your machine to make this work, which is a really cool feature, right? It actually generated the .xlsx, and if you don't have Excel installed, it'll work anyway. You only need Excel to open the file and look at the contents. So what that lets you do is you can actually build out all kinds of processes, build dashboards in Excel, you can build reports, and then you can put it up on a server where you don't need to install Excel. You can then have this thing run, you can do the export-excel, then you can drop the resulting file, you can put it on a share, or you can put it up in SharePoint, or you can email it, whatever you want to do to get it to the users that want to see it. That's what line 66 did. Created the actual file, didn't show it, so I'm going to use invoke item, and that'll show us what we got in the demo at XLSX. So this is all the data that we have, and let's do a. So if I type in PS, which is get process, right? Notice we only get 5 or 6 properties. But if I take PS and I pipe it to get member, I don't know how many folks know that exists. Okay, these are all the different properties that are on a PS object. And in fact, that's what Excel, the export Excel does. It looks at everything and it will then drop it into the proper rows and columns. So notice, right, you don't have to worry about how many rows you have, how many column headings you have. You don't have to count from row 1 to 193. All you do is you take your array of objects and you just point it at the export Excel and it does it for you. So far so good. So if we do that again, now what I'll do is I'm just going to subset what comes out of get process. I'll grab the company, the PM, and the handles properties. I'll do the export Excel back to the same file, but now I'm going to use the -show property. So this is how I iterate when I build Excel reports or dashboards. I will sit here and I'll take whatever my data input is, and I'll start sub-selecting different properties, do some calculations, all kinds of different things. I'll export it to Excel, and then I'll show it. And then when I'm done and I'm ready, I think it's production ready, I'll take the exact same line, drop it on a server, and then I remove the -show so that I know I'm just generating files. Okay, so this just comes up. We'll see, right? So nice and simple. There's the 3 properties I selected. So now I'm going to store that data. We're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to store it in $PS. Expand this window a little bit. So we're going to take that same data before. We're going to export to Excel. We're going to do the same file. We're going to do a show. But now I'm going to do something I want to do the switch called include pivot table. I also want to include a pivot chart. And I want to pivot on company, and I want to pivot the data. I want to take the handles and sum them. Pivot tables are really slick inside of Excel, something worth investing time in to learn how to use if you don't know how to use them. If you do know how to use them, this makes some really cool demos.
Doug, I think we can assume that everyone on this learning from this webcast knows how to do pivot tables in Excel quite a bit. So.
Awesome. Then this is right up. I think this is one of the cool features of the product. So let's see what happens when we do this. So it takes the data. You get the same first tab, but notice it created a second tab for you. And it's summed up the handles, and it's doing all the rows calculated by the name of the company, and it actually generated a chart for you. That's not bad for a single line of code. Now, let's do that again. What's also exposed on the export Excel is a thing called chart type. So what is that? And this exposes, and what's cool about this is these are auto-completes. So if you do chart type, and these are all the different charts that you can do inside of Excel, so you don't have to memorize them. So as you're using this at the command line or using it in ICE or Visual Studio Code, you do chart type, control space, and you can get a list of, well, what kind of chart would I like to do? So we're going to show the same demo as before, except this time we're going to do a pie exploded 3D chart. And now it's nice. I like to repeat this. You get all the data, and then you get a nice pivot table, and then you get a nice eye-popping chart. We can grab this data again, and then a couple of more pieces. You can show it with no legend. You can show the category, or you can show the percent. So you're back down to a single line of code. You have your data, and then you have a nice chart ready for management, whatever they want to do. This is much nicer. Go ahead.
Doug, do you have donut charts in there? Just curious.
Good question. I don't believe, yep, donut exploded and donut. So
Perfect.
there you go.
Perfect.
So you lay out your data and you got your donuts. Cool. And when it comes to that kind of stuff, pretty much whatever's in Excel gets surfaced up because we're just taking enums inside of the Excel piece and then saying, okay, let's just pass that through to PowerShell to make life easy. All right, so now let's play. What's really cool too is like, so here I'm showing that you can actually use whatever functions that can take data off your system, but these functions could be pointing at anything. It could be pointing at a database, it could be pointing at a REST API that brings back CSV information or brings back JSON information, or it could be files that are on disk and that you parse in any different way. Here I'm just going to show the same, what we started with, that same set of data for that first example. Notice it's CSV format, and notice the total is a Excel formula. So now I can actually include Excel formulas inside my CSV files. And I'm going to use the standard import CSV on that file, and I'm going to export it to another file name. And then there's two more pieces here. Auto size says try and fit all the data properly within a cell, and size it so that we can see it when it gets shown. And then there's this really cool thing called table name items. So just by specifying -table name and naming it, when it displays, you get a couple of cool pieces. It colorizes the chart in a zebra colorization that you can have. I've exposed this so you can actually control the colors that you use, and you automatically get this table. And when you have tables in Excel, I guess hopefully most people know about these, right? You can start to filter down on your information. Cool. And again, so I'm just taking a CSV file, exporting it to Excel, and then adding a couple of properties, and you're off to the races. So let's grab that data, put it in a variable, and now let's take a look at what auto name range does. So I'm going to take that same data, export it, and add another switch, auto name range. So since all this data is getting passed over the pipeline, ImportExcel knows how many rows and columns you have. So why not take the property names and then set it up inside of Excel? So now price knows where it is, quantity, it knows what columns, and it knows how many rows there are. So this really starts to open up some cool capabilities. We'll take that same set of data, but now also in part of this module is a thing called new-Excel chart. And I'm going to take that same CSV data, and there was a product column and there was a total column. And what I want to do is create a new chart, and I want the X range to be product, I want the Y range to be total. We use the auto name range, and now we just pass in the chart definition, and let's see what happens. So we get that same data, and now we start to build charts, custom charts that we want to play with. Now you have some more control over the charts. This time I want to tell it how tall I want it. I want 250 for the height. And I also want to create a pie chart. Again, the pie exploded. I want it to start in row, I want to place it in row 15. I want the same X and Y range, and I also want to do the no legend. So you can see some of the properties are repeated for this. So it keeps the product consistent as you deal with pivot tables and charts and whatnot. We'll take the same data, we'll pipe it through, and Excel chart definition can take an array of chart definitions. And now we have the same data, and we have two ways that if people want to see how it gets, what it looks like. This is great for management because you can have hundreds of rows of data, and then you can have all kinds of charts that summarize what's in that data. Okay, now let's take a look at, I'm going to pull in another file called sales.csv, more rows, more columns. And we're going to now just do some charts on that. Again, so I can now, you can change the titles, heights and widths, and I'm just going to splat some Excel parameters. This time I'm going to create a table, as we saw before, that had the zebra coloring. We'll create that. We'll use the auto name ranges so the chart works correctly. And it's that simple to import the CSV, get a nice chart, and we have a nice table. And if I want, I can actually start to say, just show me what's going on in the East. And I can do, I don't want to see that, I just want to see pens. And the charts are not going to. So it's a really nice tool, again, for management or even for your own data analysis to just be able to quickly take information, slap it into Excel, and start visualizing these details. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so let's move on a little bit more. And the next piece is I'm just going to grab the services on my box, and I want to grab 4 properties: status name, display name, and start type. So we have that, and let's export. Let's take a look at what we just got. Okay, so now simply pulled out the services, and that looks pretty good. Let's see what else we can do with this. Inside of ImportExcel, there's another function called new -conditional text. Takes a bunch of parameters, but its basic default is just I want to look for anything inside of what just got put into the Excel sheet, anything with the word stop in it, and I want to colorize it. So we're going to export that data from the get service. Aaron, I think you might have hit the mute button.
Nope.
Sorry, there you go.
Why does that keep turning on?
I don't know. Oh, there you go, that's cool. So let's take the get service data, export it, and now I'm going to pass in this new conditional text that we created to that parameter. And let's see what Excel does with it. Another cool feature of Excel. So now I didn't do anything in the sense of I just leveraged Excel, and I set up a conditional formatting. And now anything that has the word stop in it is now colorized that way. We can take that a couple steps further. Let's create another conditional text that anything with RUNN in it, we're going to color it blue and cyan. And conditional text takes an array of conditional texts. And now you can see we have a more readable report. We can see what's running and what's stopped. And this can apply to any kind of data that you export. And the last piece we'll do is we'll do a third conditional text, anything with the text SVC in it. We pass it in as an array. And now I can see anything that's running and stopped that has SVC. You can take this one step further. You can look for anything that has the word manual, disabled, or automatic, and you can colorize that any way you'd like. And once you get your conditional text down, you basically have a way that you can just generate a report on a regular basis. Let's take a look at some more data. I'm going to do a get process again. Going to grab company name, physical memory handles, and anything star, mem, star, wildcard, anything that has mem as a property name. And now we're going to use conditional formatting icon sets. So this is another cool feature of Excel that's exposed. I'm going to tell it I want to do it only on column C. So C:C, that's how you tell Excel that what column range you want to do, or what kind of, it could be C1:C3 or C:D. It'll take 2 columns. In this case, we're just going to take the third column over, company name. So anything in the physical memory, we want to do a 3-icon set, and we want icon type of arrows. We set it up again, and now we just pass the $CFMT variable into the conditional formatting. And then Excel sits there and says, okay, we're going to take a look at all the data in column C, and we're going to figure out from the data what's below the certain threshold, what is the threshold, and what's above the threshold. If you click on Excel, the conditional formatting, we can edit this rule, hopefully. Maybe not. Manage rules. Let's go to this worksheet. And you can see that from what we did in PowerShell, this starts to get set up. And just took the basic defaults. Here's a different kind of icon sets you can use. And it tells you when the value is this, this, and this, what arrow type to use. And most of these things are exposed through the PowerShell interface. So you can do some really interesting, cool visualizations. You can also mix and match. We can do icon sets, and we can also do conditional text. So now we're going to use both of these parameters, conditional text, conditional format that we previously set up. Run that data through again, and now you get the icons as well as visualization of the text being colorized. Cool. Okay, now comes some more fun things. So about a year or so ago, I saw somebody using Google Sheets, or maybe I saw some article on it, and Google Sheets has a capability where in one of the cells you could actually type something like equal HTML. I'm not sure, I don't remember what the keyword was, but you could type in something like equal HTML. You can point it to a URL, and then you can tell it, I believe, the table or a couple of the different tags within the HTML that it could go after. And Google Sheets would actually grab that URL, pull the data down, parse out the HTML, and then drop what you requested into a spreadsheet. So I saw that and I said, oh, that's pretty slick. So let's take a look at this URL. We'll talk about $index in a second. Now, if I do start $URL, that should launch the website. So this website is basically a list of, it's a periodic table, right? On or about the same time, I don't know how many folks know, they might know the name of Lee Holmes. He wrote the PowerShell cookbook. He wrote something for invoke web request. Invoke web request is a built-in PowerShell commandlet. And he showed, I think it's still up on his blog, how you could use it and then target a page like this, and he translates this HTML table into an array of objects and grabs the headers and makes those the property names. So when I saw that, I said, oh, that's pretty slick. Let me try to marry the two. Because once you have things in PowerShell as objects and an array of objects with property names, then you can pipe it to anything, including ImportExcel. So I took his piece, which I made part of my ImportExcel module. I did some tweaks to it. And now you can say import -HTML. You can give it the URL, and you can say I want to go after table 0, which is what the index is. Goes after that web page, and now what, if it works correctly, so it wasn't too much. I've now translated that web page into an Excel spreadsheet. And this I play with this stuff, and I point it at Wikipedia. So if I want to get lists, you're pretty much off to the races.
So, Doug, I hate to interrupt you, but that's so cool. Which command was pulling that in like that?
That's the import HTML.
So we could then take that same thing and then pipe it to the write SQL table data commandlet and write the results over to SQL Server table instead, right?
So import once it's been put into the Excel format, or without putting it into the XML format or the Excel format.
I don't know. I guess we'll have to test it, huh?
That's a good question, because I think I tied. That's a good point. So let's go down that path for a moment. Import HTML, I specifically tailored for it for ImportExcel.
Yep.
So we're going to go over here later. So since I have all the code here, I'll take a quick diversion. So I'm going to open up, and let's see if I can find import HTML. So this is what it is. So I directly export that into, I grab all the data. So I have something called get HTML table. So if you want to back level, if you want to go one level up, so if you took line 17 and get HTML as part of the ImportExcel, you could do exactly what you're talking about. So here's how you do all the goodies, and then you can take that and say, write the data to the SQL table.
That is.
So you grab line 17. Yep. So
thank you, and apologies for the diversion.
Oh no, that's perfect. That's exactly right. So it's there. Give it a try. Let me know if you have problems, and good stuff. Cool. So now let's play a little bit more with, so one of the things that once you start building open source libraries, you start building your own functions and modules inside of PowerShell, you start to have a core set of capability. And then you can start mixing and matching your own functions to do all kinds of different things. So making a leap into grabbing a web page and dropping it into ImportExcel, I didn't have to do anything to export Excel. As soon as I translated everything into objects with an array of objects with properties, property names, then it just automatically works with the rest of the pieces that I do. So one of the inspirations that why I built this thing is I play with Python a lot, and Python has something called NumPy and SciPy. And you can do lots of data manipulation in those different libraries in Python, and then they have a whole suite of graphing capabilities. And they have some really cool tricks they do to make life really easy to make that happen. So here we have some data, right? Cost, date, and name. Notice there are three different types of data. There are three different data types. The cost is a double, 1.1. Date is a date time, and name is a string. So when I import this data to use an import CSV, translate it into an object with properties, property names, make it out an array, and then line 163, I'm just going to take that data and say, hey, I just want a bar chart. So magically, notice that I didn't tell it what to chart, but it did the right thing for me. So I wrote a data inference function inside of ImportExcel, and basically what it does is it looks at the incoming data on the first row of data, and it says, okay, I'm just going to plot strings against numerics, whether it's an int or a double or a float, whatever. And now, by doing that, I can simply grab data and say, oh, I just want to do all different kinds of charts. Pie chart, right, takes the same data inference mechanism, and all I'm doing is telling you what type of chart type to do. So once you get some of the basics done, you can then start mixing and matching all kinds of cool pieces. So then I just created functions that set properties as if I was typing at the command line, and I let the data inference module do its thing. And then one last one will do a column chart. So if you have simple data and you just want quick charts out of it, this is a really handy set of tools, I find. Now, this next piece, again, it's inspired by Python, and this whole piece is using PowerShell Classes. So if you wanted to crack open the code and take a look at how classes work, it's there. And I've wrapped the classes inside of with some PowerShell wrappers that wrap the ImportExcel stuff. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a new plot, and this new plot, I want to do a plot, and I'm passing an array of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I just want to do a simple show. So in those 3 lines of code, I can get a simple graph. Notice on the X value, I remember the Y value only said 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you only pass in a single array, I make some decisions and said, okay, I'm going to number them for you. So that's one less piece of work as a user of this library that I don't have to do. And now we can take this to the next step. If you want to pass in the X and the Y, you can do that. And then I won't number it for you. So we get a similar plot, but I'll respect the values that you pass in. Now comes some more fun stuff. I don't know how many people here know that there's a thing, it's like a function. You can have a function, or you can have a filter. Filter just makes it easier to pipe things through. You don't have to set up value by property from the pipeline. So all I'm doing here with this POW is that you can pass a bunch of numbers in through the pipeline and then raise it to a certain power. I also wrote something called getRange in PowerShell. Typically, right, I can do something like 1.5, but I can't tell it like step 2, right? But with the getRange, which is part of the ImportExcel module, you can say something, I want from 0 to 5, and I want a step 0.2. So it'll do it for you. So that's what this does. So I'm going to create. That's like doing a 1.10, except you can have a starting point, an ending point, and a step range. We'll put that in $t. Then I'm going to take all the values in $t. I'm going to raise them to the power 2, store that in $t2, and then I'm going to take the same one again and raise it to the power 3, store that in $t3. New plot, and now I can plot all of those. I'm going to plot them against $t against t, $t against $t2, and then $t against $t3. I can set the chart size, and we get a nice little chart. So again, simply working with data, if you do a lot of numerical calculations, we don't really have these tools available in PowerShell, but now with the marriage between PowerShell and Excel, there's some options. And this is what I call sport coding. If I ever did this in production coding, I would shoot myself. So now I'm just going to do a get range from 0 to 5. We're going to go, instead of 0.2 to 0.02, we're going to pipe that, do a for each, and we're going to take that number, multiply it by pi, multiply it by 2, and then take the cosine of it. We're going to now set a chart size, and let's show what we get. So you can do some pretty cool things, right? So you get a cute little sine wave, and we did about 252 values. So that's just another way that I layered PowerShell classes that were further wrapped with PowerShell, and then layered that all over the Excel piece. So just to give you ideas of, if you go off and start using this, you don't have to just use what's out of the box. You can start to play with different concepts. So far, so good. So how much time do we have?
We've got 9 more minutes, technically, but okay. You can go on as long as you want. Turns out your module is amazing and respects nulls inside of the Excel files. Congrats on that, Doug. That's awesome.
Awesome. Yep. We and I had a bunch of that stuff with the nulls working, and then when James O'Neill joined the project, he tweaked it and really nailed down the pieces because he did a lot of stuff with SQL Server. So hats off to him as well. So I'm almost near the end. So what I wanted to show here is up on the GitHub repo. Can you hit mute again, Aaron? Thanks. So up on the GitHub repo, there's an examples directory. Let's take a look at that. So when I first started building this, rather than writing pester tests, I went the other way. I just started writing examples to make sure that things worked, but I didn't have an automated way to do it. But the examples have worked out pretty nicely. So if you want to figure out how things work, go up to the GitHub repo, pull this down, and then these things actually exercise a good chunk of the code. So here we have something called multiple charts. Let's take a look at multiple charts. Am I in the right place? No, I'm not. Let's open this up in the terminal. Let's run this. That's fine. So here I'm doing the same, similar to what I did in earlier demos, same kind of data. I'm creating a table name, and I'm actually laying out 3 different charts based on price, volume, and total sales. So it's pretty flexible in terms of what information you want to show, and it's using the new Excel chart definition. And you take the data, you convert it from CSVs, pass in the chart definitions as an array, and you're good to go. We already took a look at that. So here's a cool one called custom reporting. Let's open that in terminal as well. So I'm going to take this boring comma separated value data, which is about flights, right? From to what's the revenue percent, what's the revenue margins. We're going to take this boring thing and we're going to pump it through. Let's see what we get, what we can do with this custom report. And that's how quick it is. So I created this custom layout all with this module. Now this goes beyond what we've shown demos. You've got to do a little bit more programming to get this done. But I changed the titles. I've added colorization. I added a grand total calculation. Formatted the columns based on percentages and dollar signs. So what's really slick is you can actually create an Excel chart, and then rather than exporting to it, you can actually later on open it, and then at the bottom you can actually close it and then show it. In between opening and closing, there's a whole bunch of helper functions inside of this module. So you can do set formats on a particular range of cells, and you can tell it, well, I want custom formatting, I want to wrap text, I want to do horizontal alignments, I want to do inserting of columns, I want to put borders around things, whether they're just bottom bottoms or left or right. I want to change the font color of particular ranges of cells, A2 to C8. So there's a lot of things you can do. So the more you experiment, the cooler your reports come on. And then when you take this and you generate it on a server without having Excel installed, and then you present this to management through an email, or they can click on a link on a shared drive or through SharePoint, they get wowed pretty easily.
Speaking Doug,
yeah,
a question that kind of related to that. The question is, can we modify existing Excel files without having Excel installed on the machine?
Absolutely, 100%. So you can absolutely. This whole thing works on the XLSX file directly. So you don't need to have Excel installed at all. I hope does that answer the question, or?
Yeah, I think so. It's probably Excel files output by some other process or something.
Exactly. If something else, yep. If some other thing generates an Excel file, puts it up somewhere, you can just take this module, point it at that file. Instead of using ImportExcel, you can just open the package, and then you can operate on it, do things, pull data out, whatever, and you don't have to have Excel installed at all. So, yep, you're good to go. What else do we have? We got a whole bunch of other cool. This one I kind of like. Let's take a look at this, and then I'll just do one more final demo. Let's open this in Terminal. And we're going to do a mortgage calculator. So you don't have to just do reports, but you can create, okay, so you can create preset formulas, right? So you can create new cell data, and the cell data you can actually put in formulas like we saw before, or you can just put in hard-coded amounts. And now we have a calculator, so we can go, you can see the monthly payment change, you can see hopefully the monthly rate change, maybe not, and we can change the number of years. So it looks like I messed up the demo. Maybe we want to do the interest rate. Let's say it's 5%. Yeah. So not only can you put out dashboards and reports, but you can put out an interactive Excel worksheet, and you can use the full range of, pretty much the full range of Excel, and do it all from PowerShell. I think, so I got one more demo. Oh yeah, this one's kind of cool too. We'll do this and then the last demo. I keep promising. So what's slick about this is there's this REST API. We'll click on this and it won't work the first time. So I'm going to just change the dollar symbols. What they do is they provide stock data, MSFT. And so if you put a bunch of, you can put a bunch of symbols in here that are comma separated values. Okay, and it shows you, and it comes back as JSON. I have a JSON viewer in my browser, so you can see the data in tabular format. So this is easily worked with in PowerShell, right? If I do IRM for invoke REST method, I'll copy that out, store that in results. Right, and if I do .Microsoft, and we'll do .quote, right? So I've just pulled all that same data. So once I see that, what do I have? I have an object with property names. Well, let's throw that into Excel, because that's what we're here for. So with a couple of more pieces, I have something called get stock info. Let's load that up. And we have, I don't have a value, that's cool. So we're going to grab that. I'm going to do some operations on it, and then I'm going to do some charting. Do the get stock info. We'll do symbols. Let's do MSFT, IBM, XOM, and let's do GE. So now when I run it, it goes against that website, gets the JSON back, and then I do all kinds of formatting. Oh, isn't that special? That worked yesterday. I don't think it's going to work. Oh, can't bind to the range. My apologies. I don't know why that doesn't work, but I will make it work later. Yeah, it worked last night, but that should have shown all the data you saw plus a couple of charts. Unfortunate. So let me try my last demo. Hopefully that'll work. So because I like to play with charts, I like to play with graphing tools, and I like to play with charting tools or grid tools. Do another start demo. Let's take a look at what's in this. We're going to use this as the base set of information. What we're going to do here, some basic stuff. We got a progress, we got a gender, we got ratings 0 to 5, date of birth, we've got driver that's defined as true, blank, 1 for being true. I can pull that in with ImportExcel, but now let's let's create some web stuff. So I wrote this thing, and this is still an experimental phase, called convert from Excel. You tell it the Excel file you want, it figures out the default for the name of the sheet. But now I want to do something called out file. And I'm going to translate that Excel sheet into an interactive web page. Kind of cool, right? Now I'm not doing the charting, I'm using a thing called out tabulator, which is a JavaScript grid framework. And it's got some pretty cool features to it. So let's take a look at what that is. I'm going to create a variable that has an array called column options, and then I've got something I built called new column option. You tell it, well, which column do you want to convert? And I want to do the progress, and I want to apply a progress formatter to it. Okay, so we're going to convert that again, and now we're going to just pass in column options, do another page, and now you can see that this tool says, oh, well, we know how to do that. We're going to put little slide bars in. Now I want to take activity, which is it looks like it's an array, which is kind of true, and we're going to apply a line formatter, which is basically spark lines, and maybe you're familiar with those. So we're going to just do the same again. We just added another column formatter, and let's see what it. Now all of a sudden we have a really slick chart where we've got spark lines. We can still sort what we're doing, and we have 2 different types of formatted columns. Let's add a couple of more. We're going to change the column rating. The rating over here, we're going to use the star formatter. And for driver, we're going to use tick cross. Toss that up again. Now this gets to be a really interesting little report. So I'm actually translating an Excel spreadsheet into an interactive web page with this tool. And you can do all kinds of cool stuff to each of the column, each of the data types. And last but not least, we'll get a little bit of not that good type of pivot table. We're going to group by gender. And then this is the final report. So it does a couple of cool things. It now sections the data off, figures out there's 10 items with the gender male, 9 items with the gender female. These are collapsible and expandable. And even when we sort, it'll then flip the groupings, same as with the progress. So this is I like this thing. This is pretty cool. This is actually up on the PowerShell gallery. I have it as a standalone package called Out Tabulator. So if you wanted to download this, you can use it this way, and it works the same way ImportExcel works. You pipe data to it, and it gives you a HTML interactive page. I'm just beginning to wire it up so you can actually use Excel as your input. So that's pretty much all I have.
Perfect. We've got 3 questions for you that I thought are pretty good. First one is, can you do drop-down lists in Excel with this?
Great question. Can you do drop-down lists? The answer is no, we haven't figured that out yet.
Okay.
Because drop lists are not part of the file.
Okay.
They have a couple of extra pieces to it. Good question. Go ahead.
Great to know. Next one. Can we get Power Pivot data with an Excel workbook?
I've tried to do that. The Power Pivot stuff is actually a separate add-in to Excel, and it does not expose any API that I can work with. So not yet, not now. It's a bummer.
All right. And
we got 2 no's. Let's get something we can say yes to.
Okay, so this will be interesting. If you've recorded a macro within Excel, can you call execute macro from PowerShell CLI? For a second fun question, is there a way to translate an existing macro into its corresponding PowerShell commands?
Let's take those one at a time.
Yeah.
I've actually done stuff where I can crack open an Excel file and grab the VBA code. I believe at one point I was actually executing macros, but I don't want to commit to that. I don't remember. That was something that was on the list for last year, but we never got to it. I believe you should be able to, because a macro should work like any other, like equal PMT, like I showed in the mortgage calculator. So I don't know. I can't say definitively, but I believe it's an option. So I'm going to make that as a note. Now, can you translate VBA into PowerShell? That was the last question.
Yep, that's correct. And well, until we got these next ones, but go on.
Okay, no problem. We can hit them all. Good question on the VBA. So being able to translate VBA, you really can't do it. There's a couple of reasons. And to be able to do that, there's actually a product I looked at, or a open source product called, I think it's called RubberDuck. And RubberDuck is a way that you can actually parse, it can actually read in VBA and give you an abstract syntax tree, similar to how PowerShell can do it for you as well. The challenge is that, yeah, if it's straight, VBA that does mathematics, you can do it. But if it starts calling internal functions, or if it starts referencing certain types of data, being able to pull that out and operate, would be almost impossible to transpile that into pure PowerShell. But it's the VBA stuff is the next set of steps we want to do. I don't think we're ever going to see a VBA to PS type thing, unfortunately. Okay, so another question.
Does ImportExcel module work on PowerShell 6 on Linux?
Great question. So two answers to that. Yes, completely untested, and I'm waiting for another piece. So there have been some people who, other PowerShell MVPs, that have told me that they were working with their clients and they had Excel stuff on a Mac, and they just said they wanted to pull data out and reformat it because somebody changed some things, and they just gave this module a try, and it worked. They didn't do anything extra special, different. They were just kind of reading data, manipulating data, and then writing it back out. So I use a thing called EP+.dll. Now, that was initially started by Microsoft a few years ago, and then they stopped developing it, and then a bunch of folks in the community, it's all written in C#, a bunch of folks picked up the reins, and they've been maintaining this thing and making fixes and making it better. They've ported over to .NET Core. They're almost complete. So I'm waiting till they completely finish. If I run those 175 unit tests that I showed earlier against the later versions of the DLL that's supposed to run on Linux, I run those tests against the Linux box. A whole bunch of them fail. So give it a try, see if it works. It should work. If you're not doing anything super special, it should work on PS Core, on Linux, or Mac. Does that make
Awesome?
Did I hit all the points? Cool.
Yeah. All right, cool. And then
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, and once once these guys were building out the underlying libraries and they're fully 100% compliant with the .NET Core, my intention is to make this available across all environments. Cool.
Cool. And one last thing for anyone else who's hanging on, that demo that I showed right at the beginning, I was actually running a SQL query inside of there, not just PowerShell code. I probably didn't call that out well enough. But that is actually, those demos are basically part of the help documentation inside of the ImportExcel module. So if you want the code for that, just download the module and do the get help-examples on ImportExcel and ExportExcel, and you'll see those there.
Yep. Thank you and thanks to Aaron. He actually contributed a bunch of examples to the GitHub repo as well. I think you did that help, right? Or was that James?
Yep.
So that was, so that's awesome. And the more people that get on this and can get up to the GitHub repo and make suggestions, do commits, fix errors in the documentation would be awesome. And just to do a shameless plug, you know, I think I've been building this module for 2 or 3 years now. I started it because I needed a couple things, and I just threw it up here, and I was like, all right, this would be fun. And then as I dug deeper, I was like, oh, this could be a lot of fun. But we do it for free, so feel free to come up here and make a donation. There's a bunch of people that have done donations. A lot of us who do open source out here, we learn a lot. We have a lot of fun, but it's also nice to get recognized for your work in different ways. And the more help we can get, you know, we have no idea where this thing can possibly go. All of a sudden, you know, we're taking Excel and wiring it up to HTML files and making interactive pages. So there are people that are doing pull requests that are doing things, as well as asking for some really, really cool things, text rotation, charting type stuff. Anyway,
Yep.
That's all I got.
Great stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for doing this for us, Doug. We really appreciate it.
Cool.